Good morning. Good morning, good morning, good morning. I am Tamara Johnson Shealy. It is springtime here in Georgia. Oh, but it's gloomy this Friday morning. But welcome to the broadcast. Good morning. Good morning, good morning. Let's see if David is back. Y'all know he's been gone for 2 weeks. Robby, of course, is with us. Let's see if she's here. Let's see. Robby, good morning.
Morning, Tamara. How are you?
I am wonderful. Is David back? There he is.
Hello.
Hi, David. Good morning, David.
Good morning. Good morning.
Welcome back. We put out a APB. Is that what you call it? Where's Waldo? Where's David? Where have you been, David? Well, you don't have to give us details, but we missed you.
We want the details.
Robby said you had a girlfriend and you left. Ran off.
Yeah. Yes, it was my very active social life. Gallivanting around. I was in the Bahamas.
You was in the Bahamas for two weeks, David. Next time, take us.
Yeah, right.
Well, what's been going on, David? We're gonna start out this morning. You probably been. I'm sure you've been reading. You don't stop doing that, no matter where you are, even in the Bahamas.
I wish. I think that there are some really interesting things going on. The Mueller report, the end of the Georgia state legislature session, right? Some really horrendous things have been stopped. Some have been pushed through, the abortion bill. So I don't know if you are up on that. I've just, seen the headlines, listened to a few things. I think there's also a really interesting debate going on within the Democratic Party around the healthcare issue and Medicare for All or single payer system and how you get there. That would be really, I think, useful and interesting to talk about this morning, if you want to do that. So that's some of my thoughts.
Dave, what's going on with the Medicare for All and the healthcare bill?
You want me to
jump in, David? People are waiting to hear. They're waiting to hear. You've been gone for 2 weeks, David.
Yeah. Well, okay. So there has been a discussion, a forum in the progressive periodical called In These Times, and several people have given some thoughtful comments on the health insurance issue in this country. As you know, we are locked into a system that is based on private health insurance, and the only difference the only exception to that is Medicare and the Veterans Administration healthcare system, which is in effect full-on socialized medicine. The veterans system is fully paid for by the federal government, and Medicare is based upon a very a small contribution from Medicare recipients, and Medicaid is based primarily on a system for the poor. Everyone else in this country, 70% or so of people who have medical coverage are getting it from private employers. That system in itself is really creates a lot of problems because it creates dependency upon employers for health insurance, and that means that aside from being dependent on your employer for a job, which, as we know, with the exception of people who have union contracts, is at will. It's at the determination of your employer. What that means is that your health insurance is also at will, because you lose it. With some exceptions, you can pay for it in what's called a COBRA plan. In other words, you assume the payments for your employer as well as yourself, but you won't get necessarily thrown off. You'll just get thrown off because it's financially impossible to pay that twice the premiums. So the question is, how do you create a system? And of course, the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, was able to expand the risk pool to include 20 million additional people. But there are still several tens of millions of people who do not have any insurance at all, cannot afford it. And what that becomes is a leak in the system, because those people still need health insurance. Usually they get it when they are facing a catastrophe of some kind or other, and they appear in emergency rooms. They don't have any way of having any preventive care, wellness, getting medications like high blood pressure medications, unless they can figure out some way ad hoc to do that. And what that does is it creates enormous extra costs to the system as a whole, which are paid for by us, by the people who pay the taxes. So if the system has all of these irrationalities in it, and we need to figure out, or the progressives and Democrats in the primary need to figure out a way not only to get health insurance for everyone, as a right, as a basic right, but they also need to figure out a way to transition from the system that we have to the system, to a universal system. And so both of those things are really, really gnarly problems to address. And a lot of it really depends upon how much power can be mobilized against these incredibly powerful insurance lobbyists, private insurance lobbyists. So that really is the issue at this point. How do you mobilize not just people to support the one solution, but how to mobilize them to support a solution that can be imposed upon the private insurance companies, that tremendously powerful lobbying group, which generally speaking has the same interest as big pharma, the pharmaceutical companies, which have been, getting exorbitant profits for decades, and have also, hooked millions of Americans on opioids. So those two things are, we really have a criminal conspiracy there, with the opioid epidemic that is now being uncovered in the same way that we had a criminal conspiracy around getting people addicted to nicotine delivery systems, namely cigarettes. So anyway, stop me if you want to go in any direction.
You said it was a criminal. You feel like the opioid epidemic is more so criminal, and the pharmaceutical companies are to blame. And what do you suggest we do? I think we need to really take it. What's the solution to this? Do we file lawsuits? What is the solution to this?
Well, yeah, this is now really a big issue, because tobacco was much more limited in the there were well coordinated efforts to bring lawsuits against the tobacco industry, and I understand from just reading about stuff and listening to the news that there are literally hundreds and hundreds of different lawsuits that are going forward with the pharmaceutical companies like Purdue and the Sackler family, which is trying to declare bankruptcy to get out from underneath this effort, but also there are plaintiffs who are trying to settle quickly before these companies can declare bankruptcy. So there's a bit of an issue there about coordinating the efforts. But these companies have killed hundreds of thousands of people now. I mean, they're directly responsible for the deaths of hundreds of thousands of people, as were the tobacco companies. So it seems to me that they deserve a death sentence in the sense of the corporations should be, held accountable for. This is the only time I'm in favor of capital punishment. Is corporations should be given death penalties for that kind of more than just negligence. Intentional profit seeking at the expense of people's lives.
So you'd like to see there be more of a holistic approach to pain and medications, like this marijuana bill that was passed. I think that we now have an opportunity to have dispensaries for the oil.
Yeah.
So
cannabis oil. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah. I mean, obviously, if we had a health insurance system that was holistic, in other words, that had wellness as its premise, as opposed to the one that we have, we could do all of these things and create a pain management system, and that would be for people.
But I think that goes against everything that America is, David, as far as, this capitalistic society that we live in. It's all about making money. The sicker we are, the more money there is to be made. It's probably, they see it as the corporations, they see wellness as, that doesn't generate revenue. People are well. How do we make money off people being well? Yeah.
Not only that, but wellness, a system of a holistic system of medicine in which wellness is the goal. And we need to define that as both emotional and physical health. That is very labor intensive. It really requires hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people who are skilled in kind of social work, psychology, as well as medicine, as caregiving, that can deal with people on an individual basis, rather than as herds. The only herd we need is the herd immunity of vaccinations, But if we have that, we would be much more able, to take care of people, including, so caregivers become a crucial part of the system. So you're trickling down, David. You're taking money from the corporations and you're giving it to the people with offering them opportunities in these other areas. They feel like that's their money, David. Yeah, right. And that's exactly why we really need to think about power, and how we can impose the will of the people. How do we build a solidarity model, a power with model that's going to be able to impose its will on the power over model, And there is where, you know, one of the things that comes in is race and gender. The Affordable Care Act took some big steps to say that women have the right to health care, you know, for specifically women's, you know, issues around women's bodies. That
Not here in Georgia, not with the heartbeat bill. That's about time by the governor.
Of course, and if to digress just a little bit, part of the problem with that is the way that Roe v. Wade was decided back in 1974 or 3, whatever it was, you know, which is on the basis of privacy rather than on the right of self-determination over your body. And that's a crucial thing that we still need to establish, that women have a right to control their bodies. That's yeah. Robby is jumping in there. Go ahead.
I'm going to jump in. I really think, David, and you described it very elaborately and very detailed. This is just another example, and really we have solutions on the table. It's just another example of corporate America owning our government, owning our senators, owning our congressmen, owning basically our government. And there's already been an entire movement to remove that corporate power from every phase of our government. So in essence, what's really lacking here is the regulatory agencies. The regulatory agencies have been silent, quiet, to some degree. You know, they'll go to court for some cases, which sets a precedent. Most of the time, those cases are gagged. So what we really need to do is beef up our regulatory agencies and reform them in such a way that they can actually have power over either crooked congressmen, corrupt politicians, and to some degree, it's a very parallel system with our government and with doctors. Whenever you go to visit a doctor's office, you'll probably see someone coming in who's a farm rep, and they're giving free samples. And they are paying for lunch for the whole office to stand there and talk about the drugs that they want this doctor to prescribe.
Yeah.
And that is systemic. We're seeing this parallel over and over again. So again, if you look at the actual problem, go to the direct solution, which is, why is this not solvable? Our regulatory agencies, literally, we have the illusion. George Carlin, this comedian from way back, did a great skit on this about government, and that we have the illusion of government. And he even referenced it to 32 flavors, I guess, you know, Baskin and Robbins. We have the illusion of options. And that skit is really a reality right now. We are living in the aftermath and the consequences of allowing this for so long.
Yeah.
People, it's multiple levels. People have gotten so comfortable at these executive levels, you know, living on these salaries off of the body of people, and now it's time to clean it up. And the chickens have come home to roost. You know, in the words of Malcolm X, what is happening, and I'm sorry I'm distracted, David, I'm waiting for, something occurred recently with a police officer in Atlanta that got covered by the Post. And once I'm going to veer off into that, because I think it's very poignant on what you're talking about.
Go ahead.
Oh, now? Okay.
Like you got it ready, like, go ahead.
So, there was this terrible article, which it needed to be done, in the New York Post, about an officer who was undercover with gangster disciples for a drug transaction. And they figured out he was an officer, and literally he was a young man, 33 years old. And the race dynamics here are quite problematic. But that being said, they bloodied him, beat him, sexually assaulted him, and then shot him in the head twice. And the body was so mutilated that it was taken to a trunk. And these people are now in custody. And it's one example of many. I know, Dave, but the thing is, and these subjects are very difficult to talk about. But the bottom line is,
this happened in New York.
In Atlanta, but the interesting thing is Atlanta did not cover it. And the same day that I saw what was occurring, you know, in this example, I also saw an activist post about another activist who was recently killed by the police. And there was no mention of this, you know, his obituary's up. And in this activist post, who's a young white Caucasian male, he wrote, "F the police forever." And so you have to ask yourself, and I know the first, the course of action in terms of reactions, A, B, C, is first horror, B, oh my God, C, what is the punishment? But when we get to the next levels of, E, F, G, obviously what these folks did to this officer was done to them in jail. And that's a given, and I'm sorry to be so graphic about it, but there was semen found in his rectum. And I'm again, I apologize. I hope there are no kids watching, but you have to understand. We do as a society. We have to understand, because I know what happened in that room. What happened in that room is their eyes were. You thought you came here to F us. Watch who gets effed. And these are, and I promise you, there's no one who came from a well-adjusted home who got into gang activity. I challenge anyone to find me one. I'll put 10 grand on it. Anyone out there, give me a gangster who came from a well-adjusted home, and let's bring them on the show and why they chose this life, right? Chose in quotations. So I guess what the point of the point of this discussion is, when we talk about the health of a society and Medicare and so on, whatever these folks outlived in this environment, right? Whether it's pollution, lack of quality goods and services, which affects the development of a child, a broken household from mass incarceration, from the war on poverty. When the focus, and that's what I'm fearing, when the focus, for example, in Buckhead, and I say this with a sympathy for Buckhead, because they are living as affluent people under siege. There was a separate post where someone had an interaction where they wrote, we're coming to get you. And my concern is that we as a city, or as a country, instead of the holistic method, are not seeing the signs. These are signs of when people revolt. These are signs of revolution. Someone with nothing to lose, or a movement, and the numbers are multiplying. The answer is not to get the DA to lock them up forever, because what you just did was take a family member out of another household, and now we have another broken household. So I hear you, David, in terms of health, but that story and watching that whole come together really got to me today. And I wanted to share it, and see if maybe the audience thought, because one of the solutions, to Tamara's point, we don't just discuss the problems here. And luckily last week, we finally got Tamara Bottoms, and I did follow up with her office, and we're waiting to hear back. We're offering solutions from people on the ground, and that matters, because you can't solve a problem without understanding the people in the problem, without the people in that problem at the table. So for what it's worth, I just wanted to share that. Oh, and to what troubles me the most is we have this group, Atlanta Bike Life in Atlanta, who's a nonviolent representative of the demographic, that is at risk, and the city is not supporting them. They made a song, and it's super cool, called Bikes Up, Guns Down. And we have our kids around here singing that song. Yes, there's some profanity in it. Yes. Yeah, they talking about girls in it. Yes, they're men. They like girls. Some of, whatever. But what do we want? What do we really want? Are we really going to get upset about ATVs and bikes when these people can help us solve our societal problems? Look at what happened with Nipsey Hussle. This is a huge story. He was involved in gangs. He gives back to the community, and what he did by going back and creating businesses and engaging with that at-risk demographic is what the NPU, it is an NPU Economic Development Plan for Southwest Atlanta is all about. It's what it's all about. But if we have these divisions in government, have these divisions in medical, have these divisions, in every layer where we can't, get to the connections, where does that leave us? With communities like Buckhead that I empathize with, and I live in a mixed community, so I'm fortunate. I've never had a problem. I really would hate to live like that. But
David, let me ask: do you even know who Nipsey Hussle is?
I've followed the news. Yes, yeah.
Did you really know who he was? Did you figure it out? Did you kind of?
No, I would not have known anything about him. I confess, lame old white guy. I'm not somebody who's who listens to his music. But the point is that he seemed to be a model for what we should come to expect of people who make it in the system, and are committed to their own to giving back to their own communities. So what he was doing by investing in what part of Los Angeles is it? Is that South LA? Is that I'm not sure.
I'm not sure, but to your point, David, though, that's the thing. These folks, these executives, these CEOs that make money off of an entire company, right, off of the public, not giving back.
You're breaking up.
They're not. They are. When we say we're giving back to their community, and I get your point, like you're right, but really everyone needs to give back because this is everyone's problem, and we have to understand the vision of the person who's in these terrible circumstances. I recently saw a movie, I can't remember the name of it was about this autistic woman, incredible story, who studied agriculture, and she was deemed autistic or labeled autistic at 4. She went on to go graduate Temple, something famous movie now, and she created 50% of the agricultural systems for farm animals in the United States in a more humane way. And her autism, her perspective, allowed her to see what the animals went through going to a slaughterhouse and how they were treated. And she created a system that kept them calm. And I hate to use that example when it comes to people, but animals are sentient beings. And we have a system right now that is ruining people. And we're not cohesively coming together. So if anyone on here knows Mayor Bottoms, we have reached out to her office. She has agreed to meet, and we are bringing comprehensive, holistic solutions to use Southwest Atlanta as a model to heal. And it is in the best interest of City of Atlanta to allow this meeting, adopt this plan, and execute it. Because people are suffering, and whether you think everyone's suffering to a degree, except our 1% elites.
Can you guys hear me? I know we're having some technical difficulties. Can you hear me?
Am I okay? I think we lost Miss Tamara. She's probably coming on in a minute. But what do you think of that? Like, what do you think of the actions of these? They're called gangster disciples. This heinous act. But can you see how that happened to someone and why they did this to this 33-year-old police officer who's undercover, basically trying to fool them? I'm not, and trust me, I am not justifying it. I think it's horrible. But I mean, I would like your thoughts on it, because I don't know. I'm really troubled by it. I see I started a sharing as well, and I'm sorry, I have allergies. That's why I keep taking this and putting stuff on my lips. I didn't want to let Tamara down or anybody down. So, what do you think?
Can you guys see and hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, good. David?
Yeah.
Yes, but Robby's been cutting in and out, so I'm really having a hard time following her.
I was able to keep up with her a little bit. I could hear her, but you can hear me okay, right, David? I hope the audience can hear all of us.
Yes. Yeah.
So, Robby, when you told me that story this morning, it stopped me like, what happened? I don't think I was able to digest it immediately. Like the graphicness of what happened. And it's just a lot of frustration in our communities. There's a lot of people are angry. People are frustrated. People are tired of being tired. We're tired of corrupt government. We're tired of corrupt public officials. We're tired. People are tired of being tired. So you wonder why people don't want to participate in this political process. You wonder why people don't vote. People are just tired, and people are frustrated with the entire system. So, Robby, I'm still trying to absorb what even happened in that whole story. The fact that it happened here in Atlanta, we heard nothing about it. Nothing. If you read it in the New York Times.
Yeah, I'm gonna put up the link. In fact, I'll do it right now. I don't want to interrupt our I'll do it right now. I know, like, sometimes people say I'm insensitive. I don't know if that's true. I come from a different background. Like, I've lost both of my parents. My mother was, killed in an armed robbery. I'm a survivor of assault. So maybe it's not that I'm numb. It's just that we have to get past these difficult conversations to come to conclusions, come to solutions.
On the other side of it, it's like we have to have the tough conversations. We have to face this stuff head on, and then get on the other side of it so we can do better. So I'm with you, Robby. So I might be a bit insensitive too. Whatever.
Well, is that so unfathomable that these gangster disciples, 5 of them, right, thought, you're coming here to screw us. Watch who gets screwed. But obviously, that behavior happened to these people somewhere. And what if a police officer that they knew killed someone they knew? What if a police officer planted drugs on someone they knew? What if they went to jail as a young person and they were assaulted, and now they're taking out? We have to understand the psyche. And that is why our NPU system is such a problem these days. And why mass incarceration, it's not going to work. And I guess
it's not working, but government is a business. I just see I've seen it from the inside. It's a business, Robby. A lot of people are doing this. They're involved in politics, and it's about contracts. It's about padding your pockets. It's what people are trying to get into certain positions for their own personal gain. So a lot of times it's not about the community. It's not about doing what's right for people. So we have to get those people out of position. We have to get the right people in, and those of us that are, on the outside that are advocating and we're activists, sometimes some of us are going to have to run. Some of us are going to have to really step up and say, guess what? I'm going to take your damn seat.
Well, I don't disagree with that. It reminds me when you say that, what government is, it reminds me of MLK, the late MLK, God rest his soul. He tried to hold our government and country accountable to what we claimed. And to me, this is no different. Yes, have we gone way off? Yes. We have allowed the corruption to overtake, and we need regulatory agencies that are independent with funding that we will support when they find corruption. The Mueller report is a good example.
So give us an example of a regulatory agency where you could see if they did one thing different, what would that be?
Okay, well, I'll give you a plain one because this is in my industry. Law is the same thing. The Georgia Bar is supposed to regulate lawyers. The Georgia Commission of Real Estate is supposed to protect the interests of the public. Mm-hmm. I've spoken about this before. In Georgia, you are not allowed to receive compensation on a transaction, a real estate transaction, without having a license. That is so that if I, as an agent or broker, do something wrong, the general public can go and file a complaint and I can be handled accordingly, right? Mm-hmm. Well, all over Georgia, and I get these every day, especially in Southwest Atlanta, especially on the South Side. We have an entire submarket called wholesaling. If you Google Atlanta wholesaling, you will see 50,000 searches and groups in 50,000. No regulatory agency is stepping in and saying, this is illegal. This is illegal because if a wholesaler, right, who really is a third-party assignment contract, they're representing an investor, comes to you, you don't know any better because you didn't know the development that's happening. Like, I'll give you 50 grand for your house cash. They're taking a huge profit of it. The investor's happy to allow that because he's getting a house for 70%, 50% of the value. He's going to renovate it and flip it. Well, who's involved in this? Title companies, lawyers are involved in this, executing these transactions. Where is the Georgia Bar?
So oversight. So there needs to be some sort of enforcement and oversight within that regulatory agency. Is that what you're saying?
In all regulatory, yes, we need to oversee the agencies. We need quarterly reports. Another good example here at home in Atlanta is the airport. The airport would not have gotten so out of control if we had proper oversight. Animal control, right? Who regulates that contract? That is a county contract of value of over $1.6 million a year. I live not even 5 miles from animal control. There is no prevention in terms of trap, neuter, release, which affects public safety. Trap, neuter, release is something to do with cats. Sterling was on it regulates the population. When we don't do what we need to do proactively, we invite other problems. Now we have coyotes in the city. Why? Because we allowed an overpopulation of cats, which was simple to fix with trap, neuter, release, but no one oversees our county shelter. What happens in our government is we get reports and they are stamped. You can't, if you're a teacher and someone gives you a grade, you have to look, or a report, you have to look at the statistics, and you have to go in that classroom, walk around that school. You just don't accept the report that the student gave, right? You do your due diligence on it. We are not doing our regulatory agencies are not doing their due diligence, whether they don't have the funding, they don't have the actual authority, they're not an independent branch. Atlanta Ethics is a good example. A 13-page ethics report, and this is on the agenda for Mayor Bottoms, was submitted to Atlanta Ethics with phone numbers, videos, proof of documentation. Without one phone call, without one interview, Atlanta Ethics concluded there was no malfeasance. How do you make that conclusion without an actual investigation? Like, never mind if you don't believe anything regarding the problems of ethics. How does a regulatory agency who claims to have independence, who oversees the ethics in Atlanta government, make a conclusion on a 13-page report with witnesses, phone numbers, documentation without an interview?
So let's kind of keep it broad, because it gets so deep that I think I don't want to lose anybody. David, oversight and what's your thoughts there?
Well, there's two aspects of this. One is the sunlight, rule, which is, that sunlight disinfects, so that public access to this information is crucially important. The other thing is the regulatory capture concept, which is that the regulatory agencies are captured by the entities and the corporations that they're supposed to be regulating, and a lot of that has to do with revolving doors between like for instance the FDA and the big pharmaceutical companies. So where the people who are regulating the big pharmaceutical companies go to work for the pharmaceutical companies after they have a big incentive to avoid interfering with the profit making of the pharmaceutical companies, because that's who's going to hire them after whoops trying to get my after they finish their careers, or even if they don't. And that's true of the infamous example of the Pennsylvania congressman who passed some extremely favorable legislation for the pharmaceutical companies and was voted out of office and went to work as a lobbyist for big pharma. And he did huge damage with the bills that he introduced. That was about the opioids, if I remember correctly. So yeah, we have that. The question is, how do you break out of that cycle of regulatory capture? And there's some of the things that are that we're exposing in the that the Democrats with the House majority now are able to expose in the in hearings and all of the stuff that they're doing on multiple levels. Yeah. Anyway, I mean.
Well, let's recognize the comment that was on the screen. She said no checks and balances, and that's true. Right. We don't have enough systems in this country where there's checks and balances, and we're holding people accountable. We have some level of integrity. It's just it's non-existent in a lot of high places.
Well, Tamara, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I think that we need to think about, because I'm not sure about how this actually works, but I've been introducing this idea of the 9.9%, that are below the 1%, the 0.1% that are the billionaire power elite of this country. There's another 9.9% that really benefit from this system, and they are overwhelmingly white, and they make hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, and they are not only are they that's a lot of people when you think about 10% of the population of the United States. These are the enablers and the people who are creating the structures. And when you talk about
they're executing an agenda, and they're gatekeepers to something.
Well, they're more than just gatekeepers. They actually are the architects and the managers of the system. They manage the system for the several hundred thousand people who actually run the country. And they do this very much indirectly. They are the legal arm. They are the corporate executives, the managers, and not the top CEOs, but the 1,000 or so people underneath them in big corporations that are actually, running the show. And they are also the legislators. They are the people who. So when you were talking about the fact that there are people, real estate, what you're saying is a really good example. Those are people who go into politics as well as owning real estate businesses or law firms, and so there's a very cozy relationship among those folks, which it to the outside looks corrupt. To them, it just looks like, well, this is business as usual.
But see, that's the thing. It's been happening for so long. It doesn't look corrupt to the outside. People don't realize, how problematic it is. For the longest time, the FAA office was right next door to the Delta ticket office. And if you think that that's not problematic, there were warnings on this Boeing 737. And if people are not asking the FAA why they're not, but the FAA is such an old agency that and that's really why people like AOC, Ocasio, and all these new voices are able to view it from a different paradigm.
Yes, I agree with you about that. That we are getting voices now in Congress with AOC. Bernie Sanders has been there, raising these issues. But now there's a chorus. It's not just, one or two voices crying out in the wilderness. There's now really a chorus.
Other people have to come in. It cannot be one. And I saw an article about the Delta pilots negotiating their contract, and can it be a win-win? And that's fascinating to me. Why is it such a simple concept for a predominantly male field that, able to have representation, have a voice at the table, and we can have a win-win? That's what the article title is. But we had Miss Yvette on here, below wing employees, people in different demographics. People have to have those protections, labor. We have to have a seat at the table. And our government, our leaders, like Mayor Bottoms, if your cabinet is full of CEOs, where is the other piece of the information coming from?
Yeah.
So I'm taking this business associations class at Emory, right? And our professor has said on numerous occasions till yesterday in class, it finally clicked in my head, like how many times he said this, that corporations basically are designed for, the executives to make money. And he cited several cases where some corporations have tried to use the money to, raise their wages, or just do better business, do things differently, not just pay, these these executives, these stockholders. And he said this over and over again. And yesterday it finally hit me that, what, that's really all it is this an opportunity for rich people to get richer at the expense of those doing the work. And it really hit me yesterday because he said it over and over again, and it just really resonated yesterday. Like,
to your point, Tamara, this is why our masses, and we really have a problem right here, and I want to bring this back. For 5 sentient beings to brutalize a man, okay, beyond, and who's thankfully gone, And if this is not an isolated case, you know, we really need everyone here in Atlanta. I saw that there was an article about a strategic location in Midtown and what's going to be done with it. Everyone is focused on the North Side and Midtown and Buckhead and strategic locations. We have a barren parkway in Southwest Atlanta connecting the world's busiest airport to downtown. For 5 years, we have lobbied to build out that parkway and utilize our community-based resources, leveraging them, providing a stable economy with jobs, green, and more here in Southwest Atlanta. These issues were avoidable. Our system is failing. We have a problem with our ethics office. We have a problem with NPU. And to David's question, what can be done? Reform. We need reform. And the only way to properly reform is to have everyone at the table. That's the only way. To think that
they know that's the only way, Robby, and that's why they don't give us a seat.
With Mayor,
they don't give us a seat for that reason.
Why has this taken 5 years? Why do we have Atlanta Bike Life full of African American young men, entrepreneurs who have gotten so good they are featured in movies, and we are not supporting an in-town bike park when we have that same at-risk demographic, and they are a non-violent movement and portrayed
because they're brown, they're black and brown, Robby. They're black and brown. They're black and brown. If we dig real deeper. She's not, she is, but she isn't. She's, you know, there's a lot of black and brown people that once they start making money or once they get in position, Robby, they're not one of us anymore. They forget where they come from.
See, you know what, I'm going to do something, I'm going to take a liberty. And I hope it's not overstepping, because I respect Mayor Bottoms. I don't know her. I don't know her well enough to know whether I like her or not. I'm always surprised when people are like, oh, do you like that person? I'm like, I don't know that person. How could I know if I like them based on what other people say? With Mayor Bottoms, her father actually had a drug problem. And I wonder if maybe there's like a lack of connection because she's separating herself from from the mistakes her father made. I don't know. But if so, our city is having a problem because of it.
We'll come back to that, Robby. Can you hear me? We got Egberto in the house. Egberto Willies, who's always giving us a national perspective with politics done right. What's going on?
Good morning. You guys have such a great, entertaining, fact-based, in-your-face show. I was enjoying the show as I was writing my blog. You guys are great. And I want to tell David something. David, don't feel bad about Nipsey, man, because guess what? This guy here didn't quite know who Nipsey was because I don't follow. I only follow a particular group of rap artists. So I didn't like. I wasn't into Nipsey. So don't worry about it.
I know who Nipsey Russell is.
Yeah,
Nipsey Russell, but Nipsey Hussle is.
Well, let me admit that I didn't know who he was either, and then my son sent me a text and said, "Mom, did you hear about what happened?" And I was like, "I'm so lame, I don't know." But when I started looking into him, he is doing a documentary on Dr. Sebi, who had a cure. He's passed on now, but has a cure for AIDS. So there's so much that this man was doing that I was like immediately drawn to him. He's like this generation, our generation's Tupac, for those of you who remember.
Right. That's it, man. But you know what? I actually went ahead and read up on him too, because when I hear all the commotion about him, I said, I better find out something about this dude, you know, and so I went ahead and did that. But you guys got me kind of turned on when Robby mentioned that 737 crash, because here is the deal. That 737 crash is the perfect encapsulation of what capitalism is all about. I mean, do you know that those planes that crashed, they didn't want to spend, Boeing was actually charging for people's safety. In other words, everything can be commoditized. They were charging the airliners to say, if you want a safer plane, we will add another sensor on so that the computer can do some better calculations and not fly the plane into the ground or not fly the plane into the water. Perfect example of what capitalism is all about. And guess who I had on my show yesterday? Richard Wolff, who looked at me and he said, Egberto, let me tell you something. And by the way, Richard Wolff is the preeminent economist on Marxism and all these other isms out there. He really he publishes a whole lot of books. And this is what he told me. And this is interesting, folks. He said, capitalism, feudalism, and slavery, they're all the same. He said there are masters that tell the masses what to do. We just paint them differently. They have a lifespan and then they die. And he said right now capitalism, and you can watch a show that I did yesterday, but he said capitalism is now in that phase where it's about to die because of all the, he said, look, don't get me wrong. Capitalism did a few good things, but guess what? Slavery did a few good things too. Yes, on the backs of black folk, but I saw the look on your face, Tamara. Your face was so obvious. I am not speaking spiritually. I'm not speaking ethically. I'm not speaking morally. I am speaking about absolutes here. They enslaved people. They got a hell of a lot done with our labor, and that's why we talk reparations now. Hey, we gave that labor, Well, we didn't give the labor.
Yeah.
We were forced to give the labor. So, come on, Tamara. You have to get away from the spiritual, Tamara. Get away from the spiritual. This is what it's all about. He said. Then he went ahead and he talked about feudalism. Same thing. So, what I think is that as more Americans, this morning I was going to do some writing about millennials. And as more Americans start to see the degradation of this system when it comes to all the subsequent generations, what I think starts to happen is the system falls apart. And the only thing that's going to determine if this system falls apart nicely is if folks like us make that landing softer than it would otherwise be. That is what I wanted to mention after, just from the 737 crash. Imagine that.
Make the landing softer. I think you need to elaborate just a little bit. Give me something there. Don't leave me with that, because that'll be a question I have for you later.
Okay, there is an option that this country have, and we spoke about this several shows back, and that is when people don't have anything to lose, they have nothing to lose. And what that means is the following. That person who lives in the gated community, that person who has a car, who wants to have a nice life, they don't want anything to interrupt it. They don't want to have anything that's going to make them uncomfortable. However, people that don't have anything to lose don't have luxury, nor do they have that hang up. So what that means is the riots we saw in different cities in let's say Ferguson and all these other places, that will be the mainstay as this system crumbles, because as people have nothing else, they're going to take what they need to survive. And the reality is that is what America has always done as well. America has said, oil is a thing that we need in this country. We must have oil to survive. Therefore, any country, any entity that stops the flow of oil, we will blow them to smithereens. And you know what poor people are going to say eventually? Anybody that stops us from eating, anybody that stops us from living, we are going to make their lives difficult as we take what is necessary for us to survive. So that's the soft landing. The soft landing now is the following. We are there to say, hey, rich people that have been ripping us off for all these decades and centuries, stop it. Medicare for all, basic income, and all these things, you better start giving these things, because absent those things. I'm sorry, Robby. Yes.
No, he's right. Medicare for all, affordable housing, living wage, workforce housing, access, all of it. Like, and think about it. If it was you, and again, I'm not justifying, but I can't sit and be content with my ramen noodles while I watch you eat a smorgasbord of seafood and meat. And that's what happens in these transitioning communities. Literally one right next door to each other. But you don't want to steal from your neighbor because you live right next door to your neighbor. So you go to Buckhead. And Buckhead has been so insulated, right? So comfortable. Their concept of life is completely different. Their quality of life is completely different.
Exactly.
And we have to understand the social currency of race, because that's what happens when the discussion starts. It's like, well, slavery happened forever years ago, but your social currency is still very, very valuable today. Who hires you? Go ahead.
No, it's interesting that you mentioned that about slavery and the impact that it has progressively, as even for the new generation, because that's what I was talking to this guy in here. Looked at me and I gave him the picture. I looked at him and I said, if I give you a head start, nobody will ever catch up. And then he says, well, there's Oprah, well, there's the Johnson who owned BET. And I looked at him and I said, let me tell you something. Let's start speaking in the aggregate. And there are also poor white people living in Appalachia. I said, but that is not the aggregate. If we take the sum total of wealth in this country and how it was aggregated, there is absolutely no way, barring, and even reparations as we talk about it, wouldn't do it. We need a complete systemic change that's going to allow everybody equal access to success. But here's the other thing that the part that I get into trouble for. I also want to take the wealth away. In other words, ill-gotten wealth should be taken away. I mean, you don't do it in one big blurb, but the way you do it is sort of how Elizabeth Warren is talking about. She won't say it, but she understands it. And that is taxing the holy hell out of wealth. When you buy your car, which is an asset, you pay a tax. When you buy a home, which is an asset, you pay a tax. Why the hell aren't we charging a tax on stocks? Why aren't we charging a tax on bonds and all these other issues? So exactly right. I mean, it is time, and that's what I mean by soft landing. Instead of going and going to them with the pitchforks, we're going to tell them pay or else the pitchforks come.
And make no
We're
mistake,
warning them.
Exactly.
And make no mistake, there's an overall. We subsidize Boeing. Boeing
Yes.
received considerable. So in essence, we paid for that.
Right.
We paid for the FAA. We paid for the government. A lot of people often tell me I don't believe in government. Actually, someone who's watching. And that baffles me because you pay for something you don't believe in and you won't try to reform it. They'll tell me, I'll rather go around government. What?
No,
And
Jump in here for a minute.
Sure.
First of all, I just want to say something about Richard Wolff. Slavery in this country was not a separate system from capitalism. It was capitalism. It was the core of capitalism. And the fact that there was unpaid labor that was involved, forced labor that was involved, is actually a part of the system that still is with us. We have forced labor today. We have people who are incentivized not by their wage, but by coercion.
Yes.
And it includes people who are in prison. It includes people who are undocumented, and it includes people who are in precarious labor positions where they don't have any job security or safety. So there's a big element of coercion in the in the system. Without and so anyway, but that's one thing. The thing about Boeing, I think that's really important is is one of the things that's important is that the not just the regulatory capture of the FAA by Boeing, which is really one of the things that's happening, and what you were saying about a la carte safety features on the being sold to the airlines who are buying the plane, but also that Boeing has control over that, right? And FAA inspectors do not, because there are so few FAA inspectors, which is part of why that they can't impose or challenge their.
So guess what, y'all? We're at the top of the hour. We want to thank Mr. Egberto for always coming on, giving us a national political update and pouring gasoline on our fire.
Thank you so kindly. I enjoyed being here. And one quick closing statement is, David, thank you for that new phrase that I will actually add to my blog. Coerced labor equal slavery. Thank you, brother. Tamara, Robby, David, have a wonderful day. Great show.
Thank you, Egberto. All right, guys, we're at the top of the hour. This hour moved so fast, so fast, so fast. I want to thank everybody for joining us on this week's broadcast. I am Tamara Johnson-Sheely, and I want to thank my trusty co-hosts, Mr. David Slavin and Miss Robby L. Caban. You can find me at tamarasheely.com. You can always find Mr. David at Facebook. Acknowledge the Divide right here on Facebook, and Miss Robby at NPU Resident Public Forum, and always Mr. Egberto Willies at politicsdoneright.com. Next Friday, same time, same channel, and we're going to be on fire all over again. Have a great week, everybody.